Imagine this. You're living on the open plains, snow piled high, wind tearing across the land. The temperature outside has dropped far below freezing. You and your family are huddled together inside the warm glow of a buffalo hide teepee, the fire crackling at the center, its smoke rising through carefully managed flaps. Survival here isn't a luxury. It's a battle, fought every hour against the cold, the hunger, and the elements. Now picture this moment. You feel the familiar pressure in your stomach. Nature calls. No plumbing, no outhouse waiting nearby. Just a frozen landscape outside and a crowded, shared living space inside. The question is almost too awkward to ask. How did Native Americans handle bathroom needs in the middle of brutal winters inside a teepee? This is the side of survival we rarely talk about. We love to admire the beauty of the teepee, its elegant cone-shaped design, its spiritual symbolism, and its ingenious engineering for heat and ventilation. But behind the romance, there's a truth that every human shares. The body doesn't wait for spring to take care of its needs. And this is where native ingenuity shines in an entirely different light. Because far from being primitive or careless, indigenous communities developed surprisingly effective, thoughtful systems for managing hygiene in conditions that most of us today would find unbearable. Forget porta potties. Forget modern plumbing. In a frozen landscape, waste disposal had to be practical, discreet, sanitary, and sustainable. And the solutions weren't crude improvisations. They were clever, efficient, and deeply tied to cultural norms about respect, cleanliness, and community health. In this video, we're breaking a taboo subject wide open. We'll explore the hidden bathroom secrets of the winter teepee, from the materials used for waste control, to how privacy was maintained in shared spaces, to how sanitation practices connected to broader community survival. We'll look at how ash, snow, earth, and even certain plants became tools of hygiene, and how bathroom solutions were integrated seamlessly into daily life. And we'll also bust some myths, because contrary to popular imagination, no one simply went anywhere in a teepee. The systems in place were intentional and functional, guided by knowledge that we can still learn from today. In fact, many of these strategies reflect the same principles used in modern, sustainable sanitation: reducing waste, recycling nutrients, and minimizing environmental impact. So whether you're fascinated by ancient survival skills, curious about sustainable living, or just intrigued by the hidden realities of teepee life, stick around, because we're about to unlock a chapter of history that's rarely spoken about, but essential to understanding how people truly lived. This isn't just a story about teepees. It's a story about adaptability, creativity, and the quiet genius of human survival in the harshest environments. And yes, it's about bathrooms in winter. When most people picture a teepee in winter, the image is almost romantic. Snow falling softly outside, a warm fire glowing within. Families wrapped in furs, laughter and storytelling echoing beneath the cone-shaped roof. It feels cozy, simple, even idyllic. But there's one detail often left out of this picture: the reality of human needs. The paradox of the winter teepee is this: while it was brilliantly designed for heat retention, ventilation, and mobility, it still had to accommodate the same biological realities that we all face. How did people handle sanitation when stepping outside meant braving freezing winds, knee-deep snow, and temperatures that could cause frostbite in minutes? And how did they do this without contaminating the very living space that kept them alive? The myth we often inherit from movies or popular imagination is that indigenous people just went outside. While true in warmer months, the heart of winter demanded smarter solutions. Walking far into the snow at night was risky, not only for comfort, but for safety. Predators lurked. Storms could blind. Children and elders especially needed alternatives, The tipi, as ingenious as it was, had to serve more than just shelter. It had to become a system for survival in every sense. This is where reality diverges from the romanticized picture. Life inside a tipi wasn't primitive guesswork. It was carefully adapted to the rhythms of the season. Sanitation practices were thought through, shaped by necessity, and integrated with cultural values. Ashes from the fire weren't just waste. They became odor control. Snow wasn't just an obstacle. It became a cleansing tool. Privacy wasn't ignored. It was respected through clever design and social norms. So when we strip away the myths and step into the reality of winter tipi life, we find something richer. A survival system that acknowledged the uncomfortable truths of human life and solved them with resourcefulness. The tipi wasn't only a home. It was a living machine, one that kept families warm, healthy, and dignified, even through the coldest months. Inside a winter tipi, waste management wasn't left to chance. Families couldn't risk fouling their living space, yet stepping outside in the middle of a storm wasn't always possible. The solutions they developed were practical, sustainable, and surprisingly sophisticated. The first method relied on ash and earth. Every tipi had a fire at its heart, and with fire came a steady supply of ashes. Far from being discarded, ashes served as a natural deodorizer and absorbent. Small amounts of human waste could be covered with ash, neutralizing odors and reducing the risk of contamination. In some regions, dry earth or sand was used similarly, often kept in containers or animal hide pouches near the entrance for emergencies. Snow itself was another tool. Clean snow could be used to cleanse or cover waste quickly, functioning almost like a natural flush system in sub-zero conditions. For tribes in regions with heavy snowfall, this was a readily available and renewable solution. Containers played a role too. In some cases, temporary receptacles were fashioned from bark, woven baskets lined with hides, or even discarded pottery shards. These were discreetly emptied outside during daylight hours when conditions were safer. In communal settlements, external latrine pits dug away from the living area were used, covered with soil, bark, or snow after each use to maintain hygiene. But waste management wasn't purely technical. It was cultural. Hygiene practices were tied to taboos, traditions, and respect for the home. The tipi was more than a shelter. It was a sacred space. This meant keeping it clean wasn't just about health, it was about honor. Elders often guided children in these practices, teaching that waste disposal was part of respecting both the family and the earth. What stands out here is efficiency. With no plumbing, no chemicals, and no modern sanitation systems, Native Americans created a cycle where nothing went unmanaged. Ashes from the fire were reused, snow became a cleansing tool, and earth provided coverage. Every element had a role. It was survival turned into routine. And it worked. A tipi wasn't just a shelter. It was an intimate, shared home. Families cooked, slept, told stories, and survived together inside its circular walls. That closeness meant that privacy, especially for personal needs, had to be maintained with subtlety and respect. The conical design of the tipi already gave it an advantage. Warmth from the central fire rose upward, circulating through the space and ensuring the coldest drafts stayed near the ground. This meant that certain corners of the tipi, often near the entrance or behind stored goods, could serve as discrete spaces where temporary needs were managed without compromising comfort. Placement also mattered. Bedding and sitting areas were arranged in a way that gave elders or families the central warmth, while practical corners were reserved for storage, tools, and sometimes waste receptacles. Hides, blankets, or even simple wooden frames could provide a screen, giving a degree of privacy even in a crowded household. Sound and odor were controlled by design. The constant crackle of fire, the thickness of hides, and the steady draft through the smoke flaps all worked together to keep the air moving. Ash from the fire, sprinkled as cover, ensured sanitation didn't clash with dignity. Most importantly, privacy wasn't just architectural. It was cultural. There was an unspoken understanding that these needs were natural, temporary, and to be handled discreetly. Respect for one another's dignity was built into daily life. The brilliance of the tipi wasn't just in how it held warmth against the winter cold. It was in how it created space for survival, comfort, and privacy, even when dozens of lives were lived under a single roof. While the tipi itself was an ingenious winter home, sanitation and hygiene couldn't always be contained within its walls. Larger communities, especially those that gathered in winter camps, relied on broader survival strategies that complemented the tipi's private systems. One common practice was the use of external latrine pits, dug at a safe distance from the living areas and water sources. These pits were covered with snow, earth, or bark after each use, preventing contamination and keeping odors at bay. In especially harsh weather, waste might be temporarily stored in containers inside and later emptied into these pits when conditions improved. Communal health was always the priority. Fires not only kept people warm, but also produced ash, which was shared among families as a natural disinfectant. Fresh snow was used as a cleansing resource, serving both practical and hygienic purposes. These weren't just tricks. They were part of a larger rhythm of life, where survival was collective, not individual. Even broader strategies included seasonal settlement planning. Camps were deliberately placed near resources that would make winter sanitation possible. Flowing water sources, wood for fires, and sheltered areas that reduced exposure during necessary trips outdoors. Nothing was accidental. The choice of location itself was a survival strategy. Together, these methods show that Native American winter survival was never confined to the tipi alone. It was a community effort, a network of practices that ensured health, cleanliness, and dignity, even when snow buried the earth and the wind screamed through the plains. At first glance, the bathroom practices of winter tipi life might seem like an obscure detail from history. But when we look closer, they reveal lessons that still matter today, especially in a world facing environmental challenges and a growing need for sustainable living. The first lesson is about resourcefulness. Native communities didn't see waste materials as useless. Ash from the fire wasn't thrown away. It was turned into a disinfectant and deodorizer. Snow wasn't just a barrier. It became a cleansing tool. This mindset, of finding use in what the environment already offers, is something modern societies are only beginning to reclaim. In the confined space of a winter tipi, keeping things sanitary was essential. Without plumbing, soap, or disinfectants, Native Americans turned to the resources around them, and what they discovered was both practical and ingenious. Ash from the central fire was one of the most important tools. Its fine, powdery texture absorbed moisture, covered waste, and neutralized odors. Ash also has alkaline properties, which naturally kill bacteria and slow decomposition. Sprinkling it over waste or storing small amounts in containers ensured that hygiene was maintained even in close quarters. Snow was another versatile resource. Clean, freshly fallen snow provided an immediate way to cleanse hands or wipe surfaces. It acted as a natural rinse in a world without running water. Snow could also cover waste outdoors, sealing it from animals and helping to contain smell until it froze solid. In winter's harshest grip, snow was the most abundant and renewable cleaning tool. Plants added another layer of ingenuity. Certain species, like sage and cedar, were used not only for ceremonial purposes, but also for cleansing. Soft mosses or natural fibers could serve as absorbent materials, while aromatic herbs were sometimes burned to purify air. These practices combined practicality with cultural meaning, showing that hygiene wasn't just physical, but spiritual. What makes this remarkable is the efficiency. Nothing required outside resources or complicated systems. It was all drawn directly from the land. Fire, snow, and plants became a natural sanitation kit, used with knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. These simple, low-tech solutions worked then, and they still hold value today, reminding us that cleanliness doesn't always come from chemicals in bottles, but from nature itself. Life inside a winter teepee was deeply communal. Several family members might share the same space, sleeping, eating, and working within a circle of just a few feet. In such close quarters, privacy was not created by walls or doors, but by social norms. Unspoken rules that allowed dignity even in situations where privacy was scarce. For matters of hygiene, discretion was key. Waste disposal, for instance, was handled quietly and respectfully, often using containers or secluded corners of the teepee. When someone needed to step outside, others understood without comment. The silence around these actions wasn't avoidance, it was respect. We've uncovered a side of winter survival that few people ever think about: the hidden bathroom secrets of the Native American teepee. From using ash and snow for sanitation, to maintaining privacy in communal spaces, to building external systems that kept entire camps healthy, these practices remind us that survival is never just about food and fire. It's about dignity, respect, and the quiet ingenuity that turns even life's most uncomfortable realities into sustainable solutions. Think about what we've seen. No plumbing, no disinfectants, no modern comforts, and yet these communities thrived. They adapted, they worked together, and they found ways to keep their homes warm, clean, and safe, even in the coldest months. And the lessons they left behind go far beyond history. They show us how resourcefulness, respect for nature, and cooperation can solve challenges that still face us today. If this journey opened your eyes, if you found yourself imagining the glow of a winter fire inside a teepee, or realizing that even ash and snow can be survival tools, then there's so much more waiting to be discovered. On this channel, we dive into the forgotten wisdom of the past, exploring the inventions, practices, and traditions that prove human creativity has always been extraordinary. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon. Share this video with someone who loves history, survival, or simply wants to learn how people truly lived in the harshest conditions. Because together, we're not just telling old stories, we're unlocking lessons for the future. The past still speaks, and if we listen, it may just show us how to survive tomorrow.